guys, Nick Wisdom here with Heli Direct with another offering in this sort of drone helicopter hybrid space. So what we have here is the Yuzhang F06 EC135 scale helicopter. This is completely ready to fly, everything you need in this box in order to get yourself in the air. And speaking of the box, let's go ahead and crack into it and see what we've got. Alright, so opening the box here, you can see we've got an instruction manual here. We'll set that aside. We've got a bag of some spare parts, looks like some spare blades and things. We'll look at that in a minute. And then in this nice carrying case that you can reuse, go ahead and take this plastic out of here. We've got the main helicopter, the battery pack, and our transmitter here. So let's go ahead and get all this stuff out of the box and then we'll dig into it a little further. Alright, so now we got everything out of the box. Let's go ahead and kind of look through things one at a time. So of course, it comes with a fully featured instruction manual here for the F06. When you dig into it, you'll see that it includes basic instructions for charging, pretty straightforward stuff, a full map of the transmitter and what each of these buttons and things do. And there's some unique things there that we'll talk about a little bit. And then basic operation of the helicopter. So do make sure you read this through the whole way. Okay, outside of that, you have a single battery pack. You can order additional ones, and in fact, the case will hold up to 3. The interesting thing about this battery pack, it charges via USB-C. In fact, that's the only way you can charge this pack. So if you have a hobby-grade charger for your other models, you will not be able to use them with this pack. Do be aware that although the battery lasts a great amount of time, approximately 8 to 9 minutes is what I'm seeing, depending on how you fly. But it does take a long time to charge. It can take up to about an hour to charge via USB-C. All right. We also have a nice bag of spare parts, which is always appreciated. Let's see what we get. So we get a full set of 4 rotor blades, completely spare on top of what the kit comes with. And then we've got a probably 1.5 millimeter Allen wrench. We have a small Phillips jeweler screwdriver. We have a replacement tail blade, and then a really tiny Allen wrench that I have to imagine, you probably can't even see this on camera, but there you go. It's a 1 millimeter Allen wrench, and then it includes the USB-C charge cable. So standard USB-A to USB-C charge cable. You will need to provide your own source of USB power. So any old USB wall wart sticking around the house or a computer if you need to. And then the next thing to take a look at is the transmitter. Now, the transmitter here is not super hobby grade. It's, a fairly inexpensive plastic transmitter. Interestingly, the gimbals on this transmitter are the ball style. So in terms of what you might be used to, a typical sort of vertical track and a sideways track, this is like a golf ball with a stick over it, but it does move fairly well. Every now and then, if you take your finger off it, sometimes gets stuck in a corner, but for the most part, they whip back to center, and see, there we go, that one's stuck in the corner. So you just got to be aware when you're flying that sometimes you need to pull it back. No big deal there at all. All right, some of the buttons on the transmitter, a power button here at the top center. Now, the manual does a nice job of explaining. For those of you that have flown radio control before, you might think these buttons here adjust the trim of the various functions, and they can if you get in the right mode, but they actually also have some other functions as well. For example, this one here, depending on whether you hit the top or bottom, switches you between the manual flight mode and the self-leveling altitude hold, position hold flight mode, and we'll talk about those two differences in just a minute. But that's a basic overview of the transmitter. It does take 4 AAA batteries that are not included in the kit, so make sure you have those handy. All right, let's take a look at the helicopter itself. It does have a direct drive main rotor, so there's a motor that's driving directly this shaft that the 4 main blades rotate around. And then there's an additional motor here in the tail driving this clear plastic tail prop, which incidentally you do get an extra one of as well. Now, it is on the real helicopter what we call a fenestron tail, but this one is just decorative. There's just the tail rotor, but I gotta say, once it's in the air, you don't even realize that there's a prop here, especially because it's clear. Now, there's no easy way to remove this canopy. You're not really meant to get inside unless you have a crash and need to do repairs. So you will have to use that small jeweler screwdriver to sort of take the 2 halves of the canopy apart. You can see the sort of molding line here and these small holes where there are screws. Now, you can order spare parts for this helicopter. Heli Direct does stock them. So if you do have a mishap and you need to purchase something, you can certainly do that. Now, you can see here is the battery bay. Now, interestingly, in this helicopter, this battery is actually an integral part of the outside of the fuselage. So why don't I go ahead and just show you how you install this. So it's got this sort of pump on the battery that slides in first, and then it has these two little clips right here. So you push these in, kind of push down, and then you want to make sure, and I'm going to be quiet so you can hear this, that both of these little nibs here have snapped all the way towards the outside of the fuselage, and that this little nib right here is on the front, and now it's not going to come off. So as you can see, what I meant by scale is, look, it just seamlessly becomes part of the bottom of the helicopter. Now, there are some cool features on this in that there are lights that show you the status of the battery, as also includes whether what mode you're in terms of whether you're in the stability or self-level, including this light back here, which shows up really well, even in daylight, I found, even in a little bit of shade on the helicopter there. There is also a little working navigation light on the top of the tail as well. And then there's actually a little headlamp here on the front, or landing light, I should say, of the helicopter as well that shows up really well. So some nice scale details. All in all, there's some nice rivets and panel lines and door lines. The scale detail on this helicopter is quite nice, especially for a model in this small size. All right, so enough of us talking here. How does it fly? So let's go ahead and talk about some basics in terms of how you take off and how you set it up. So setup is done, essentially. There's nothing to do. The factory has taken care of all of it, although if you do have a crash, there are ways to adjust servos and whatnot, and the manual covers those. But to get the helicopter started, underneath the body, there's this little button right here, and you just go ahead and press that. Now, I know you're all saying, I'm turning this on before the transmitter. That's wrong. So you turn that on, then you come over to your transmitter here, and then turn the power on. It'll beep, and then the blue light at the top should be solid, and then that is how you know, and you can see here as things wiggle, that I'm connected to the transmitter. Now, some other things to notice, if you look at the navigation lights on the helicopter, they've turned green. There's also green light on the bottom there from the battery, so this navigation light here is now green. Now, what does that green light mean? It means the optical flow sensor is working. What the heck is an optical flow sensor? The optical flow sensor is right here on the base of the helicopter, and it's a downward-looking camera, and what it does is it actually looks at the texture of the ground, and it uses that for a position hold, so it doesn't drift. It stays over a specific point. Now, in reality, the helicopter will move slightly and drift just a little bit, but I found it stays within a 12-inch square, something like this, really easily. It works really well. Now, much like a computer mouse on a glass uniform table, that doesn't work so well. So if you're over a perfectly, let's say, a freshly paved parking lot with no texture, no striping, all the same color, it's not going to work as well. It really needs to see variation in the ground in order to work. But on every surface I've tested it on in the real world, grass, my concrete driveway, the road in front of my house, dirt, it hasn't had any problem with the position hold. In fact, it's worked really, really well. So well, it's almost like flying a GPS helicopter back. So nothing to worry about there. And incidentally, when you power the helicopter up, it will be in this optical flow mode. Now, the other thing that happens in that mode is there's actually a barometric pressure sensor in the helicopter that gives you altitude hold. So not only will the helicopter hold over a specific point, it will also hold the same altitude. So instead of bobbing up and down in the wind, or helicopters just drift in general, if you let go of the sticks, the helicopter will hold the exact same altitude and its position when it's in optical flow mode, which is really cool. And you can see as you watch some of the clips here that it works really well. It does drift just a little bit, especially if it's windy outside, but you can let go and have full confidence. How much confidence? So much confidence, I let my 9-year-old son fly this helicopter that I don't own. HeliDirect sends it to me and I have to send it back. But I had no fear letting my 9-year-old son fly it. Now, my son has not flown a radio control helicopter ever. He has buddy boxed on a radio control airplane a few times and is really good with his RC truck, but has never flown a helicopter before. And with just some basic instruction, I never took the transmitter out of his hand. He was able to spool the helicopter up, get it to a safe altitude, got a little nervous, and he just lets go of the sticks. And the helicopter holds its position, and then he can regroup, figure out where he wants the helicopter to go, and slowly move the sticks, kind of explore the movements, what happens, how fast does it go. And by the third battery pack, he was, flying basic circuits around the front yard, meaning like circular-like patterns, and really enjoying himself. He also had absolutely no problem landing the helicopter, and we'll get to how you do that first. But first, let's go ahead and show you how you take the helicopter off. Now, just going to turn the model off so it doesn't spool up here on my table. The first thing you do is you pick up your transmitter like this, and you're going to move the sticks diagonally down and out. So you're going to the bottom left and bottom right corners with the sticks, so move them out, and then the main rotor will start to spool up slowly. And then the next thing you do is you take the left stick, you slowly move it up, and what happens then is the rotor turns into a higher RPM where it's ready to lift off, and as you slowly move the stick up, the helicopter will lift off the ground. You might get really excited at this point. The helicopter's 2 feet off the ground, just let go of the sticks. It's going to park there in a hover until you're ready to input the next command. Your heart rate's come down, you're not nervous anymore. So when you're flying around in the stable self-leveling mode and you encounter some of these sort of bobbles and it holds still and it's a little bit like, I don't want to say jerky because it's not, but things aren't quite as fluid as flying the full-scale helicopter is. Don't worry about that, because as you progress and learn, once you get really good in the stabilized mode, you can press this top left trim here next to the stick, and it is going to put you in manual mode. Now, in manual mode, the helicopter no longer holds its own altitude. You have to manage the left stick as up and down in order to get it to go. Now, it doesn't drop out of the sky or become wildly difficult to fly. It's just not stabilized in altitude, and it's still stabilized in direction. So if you lean to the right and it goes this way and you let go of the stick, the helicopter will bring itself back to level, even in manual mode. But the nice thing about manual mode is your turns can be smoother and coordinated, and you can see here in the example on the screen how much better the turn looks in the manual mode in terms of appearing more scale than it does in the stabilized mode, which is a little sort of jerkier and more bobbly. But the bobbles keep you safe. Now, do I think it's really risky to go to manual mode? No, not at all, but I would certainly make sure you're proficient in the automated altitude hold and position hold until you do that. And the other thing about manual mode is if you do let go of the sticks, the helicopter will drift. So it's not being held over any position, so any wind or whatnot will take the heli and slowly move it. So you have to actively stabilize the helicopter yourself. Although it'll keep the disc level, the helicopter will still sort of drift in the wind, and you've got to sort of, work your way back against the wind. There's no position hold on the ground. Same thing with altitude. As the wind changes or there's a gust, the helicopter may bob up and down. You have to actively manage that left stick to hold the helicopter at the same altitude, which, if you're interested in learning to fly a full-fledged 3D helicopter, can become a valuable skill down the road. Now, this is, however, just to be clear, if you are interested in 3D, very much a hybrid sort of drone-like flying helicopter. I always call it a drone in helicopter clothes, because honestly, that's what it is. If you're learning to fly a drone, this is exactly how it flies, in stabilized mode or position hold, although it typically uses GPS to hold this position instead of a camera. So, super fun model, scale-like flying appearance, very safe for even a child to learn, so great toy to play with if your kids, if you're thinking about getting them in RC helicopters and you want to sort of like set the hook in their mouth, as we say. It's a great helicopter to just sort of get them started, give them some confidence. They will learn some basic orientations in terms of which way to move the rudder when the helicopter is facing them, moving the helicopter forward and away when it's nose in, and keeping it stable when they switch to manual mode. So those things are still the same, even though this is very much more stable than perhaps a full-fledged 3D helicopter is. So we've gone through our flight, we've had fun. How do we land the thing, right? Piece of cake. To land the helicopter, it's really as simple as getting yourself over a nice flat and level surface, and then slowly lowering the helicopter by taking the left stick and pulling it down somewhat, nice and slow. Don't, race it into the ground. Once you're a couple inches off the ground, settle it into a flat surface, and then take this left stick, hold it all the way down, dead center on the bottom, and that cues the helicopter to shut the motor off. Now, you can also take both sticks and move them into the inside corners, and that will disable the motor as well. But I found that this is the easiest way. Take the left stick, move it straight down, and that shuts the motor of the helicopter off. And then to power it off, once you've landed and you've disengaged the throttle, flip it over. Just hold this little green button right here, and then you'll notice the green lights will turn off in just a second. And there you go. Now the helicopter is safely powered down, and you can take the battery out. Speaking of taking the battery out, you just reverse what you did before. So these two little black nibs, push those in, grab this little tab in the front with your fingernail, and just pop it out of the helicopter. It will be a little bit warm after you've been flying, so let it cool down, and then you can go ahead and plug it into the USB-C charger. Again, it takes upwards of an hour for the pack to charge, so it's definitely worth, if you want to get some serious flying in, purchasing an additional one. So who's this helicopter for? So this helicopter is a great choice for, let's say, kids or maybe your children, that you want to give them a taste of what it's like to fly a radio control helicopter, see if they're interested in getting more involved, and help sort of get them hooked so they'll put in the work and the simulator before they fly some of the more complex versions. Or honestly, it's for people who just want something fun to fly in the backyard. Not everyone is into putting in all the work in the simulator, learning all your orientations, going through all the process of crashing and repairing in order to learn how to fly a radio control helicopter. Not everybody wants to put in all that work. Some people just want the instant gratification and have some fun flying something that looks like the real thing around their backyard. And for this, honestly, the EC135 is a great choice. From box, you literally can be flying. If we were to subtract the time to charge the battery, you can take this thing out of the box and fly it inside 5 minutes. You just got to read the manual, figure out how to safely boot it up, make sure it's in stability mode, and then you're good to go. Super simple. All right, with that, I'm Nick Wisdom. This is the Yuzhang F06 EC135 radio control helicopter drone hybrid. Any questions, go ahead and drop them below in the comments. We'll be sure and get to them, and thanks for watching. And you, sir, just landed your first helicopter.
Yes, sir! Let's go!
Heli direct!